This is part 2 in my video response to ZeroPointUFO about chemtrailing. In this section we're going to look at the use of trimethylaluminum in chemtrailing. ZeroPointUFO continues. To respond to your question, I need only to provide one plausible explanation that explains how chemtrails can be formed directly behind a jet engine, and in doing so your first question is answered. ZeroPointUFO then posts the following information. The highlighted texts are copy and paste from various chemtrail articles on chemtrail web pages. ZeroPointUFO goes on to quote, "I would like to point your attention towards a substance called trimethylaluminum. Trimethylaluminum is the chemical compound with the formula Al2CH36 as abbreviated or abbreviation TMA, trimethylaluminum. This pyrophoric, colourless liquid is an industrially recognised organoaluminium compound. It evolves white smoke, aluminum oxides, when the vapour is released into the air. TMA is a combination of hydrocarbons that closely resembles gasoline." To quote an analysis conducted on geoengineer David Keith's report, quote, "We attempt to explain the physics of how jet fuel can be formulated to actually contain aluminum in the form of trimethylaluminum in order to spray aluminum oxide aerosols that originate directly from additives already in the jet fuel." End quote. It goes on to say, in 2010, geoengineer David Keith contracted Aurora Flight Sciences, AFS, to perform a cost analysis for geoengineering based on the TMA spray model. AFS determined that the Boeing 747 would be the most efficient aircraft since about half of the world's cargo is currently transported by 747. The melting point of aluminum is 660 degrees Celsius, while the combustion chamber in a 747 engine is over 1800 degrees C. The combination will cause any aluminum in the fuel supply to vaporize on combustion and for a while longer as it exits the engine exhaust as thrust. The vaporized aluminum remains transparent and is not immediately visible as a telltale white streak due to the unavailability of oxygen to allow the aluminum vapor to transform into its final stage as aluminum oxide. Observers are understandably confused when the temporary invisibility of the actual chemtrail mimics the appearance of a normal contrail." End quote. Now remember that all of the text highlighted in yellow are copy and paste from articles on various chemtrail conspiracy websites. My response, ZeroPointUFO has not done his homework by checking the facts. By relying on a copy-paste of information from various chemtrail conspiracy web pages, he has simply perpetuated errors, misconceptions, lies, and in this case, hoaxes. Yes, the melting point of aluminium, or aluminum, is around 660 degrees Celsius, but this is not the temperature that it vaporizes. The boiling point of aluminum is much higher than the melting point, and much higher than the stated temperature of the combustion chamber in a 747 engine, which was stated to be over 1800 degrees C. The author does not state how much over 1800 degrees C the combustion chamber reaches, but the boiling point of aluminum is 2470 degrees C, somewhat hotter than 1800 degrees C. But I'm not really sure why the author would be talking about aluminum in the fuel supply as if it was a solid, which of course it would not be. There is a big difference between aluminum, a solid, and trimethylaluminum, a liquid, and indeed TMA, trimethylaluminum, has a much lower boiling or vaporization point at only 125 to 130 degrees C. Now this would at first glance seem to give credence to the claim that trimethylaluminum, or TMA, is used as an additive in the aircraft fuel supplies for the purpose of chemtrailing, but the author and ZeroPointUFO have failed to consider some insurmountable problems. Now I could go into great detail explaining how ZeroPointUFO has failed to account for the weight and volume requirements for adding a chemical such as trimethylaluminum to the fuel of an aircraft, and the effects that it would have on the aircraft engines and turbines, as well as the effect on the fuel efficiency of the aircraft, etc. But in the case of trimethylaluminum, TMA, such analysis is not necessary, as there is a far greater problem that ZeroPointUFO has failed to understand. As stated above by ZeroPointUFO, trimethylaluminum, TMA, is a pyrophoric. It appears that ZeroPointUFO has not done his homework on pyrophoric substances. A pyrophoric substance, from Greek pyrophoros, or fire-bearing, ignites spontaneously in air at or below 55 degrees C or 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Trimethylaluminum TMA is highly volatile and reacts by bursting into flames on contact with air, or oxygen, or water. It is highly explosive. There is no way that trimethylaluminum TMA could be used in the manner suggested as an additive to the aircraft's fuel. Even if it were not added to the fuel but sprayed directly into the atmosphere, the results would also be explosive. Now here is some information from trimethylaluminum safety and handling. Quote, "Trimethylaluminum ignites upon exposure to air and reacts violently with water. Water must be scrupulously removed from process equipment prior to putting it into metal alkyls service. Failure to do so may result in an explosion. If heated above 70 degrees C, trimethylaluminum will undergo exothermic decomposition with evolution of flammable gas. Products of complete combustion of trimethylaluminum are aluminum oxide, carbon dioxide and water. Trimethylaluminum causes severe burns to the skin and eyes. It is imperative that proper personal protective equipment be worn when handling trimethylaluminum." And there's a link there which you'll find in the description area. So let's have a look at trimethylaluminum TMA being exposed to oxygen. Now in this video we see two vials of trimethylaluminium or trimethylaluminum being exposed to oxygen. Here are the two vials, and this object is being used to smash the vials to bring them in contact with oxygen. Let's see what happens. That's what happens when trimethylaluminium comes into contact with oxygen. Let's have a look at the second vial. Obviously they're taking great care not to come in contact with this stuff because it is extremely volatile and dangerous. That is what happens when trimethylaluminium comes into contact with oxygen. Can you really imagine highly volatile and explosive TMA being mixed with highly explosive aircraft fuel? I think not. Now in this next video we see a chemistry teacher demonstrating the volatility and handling problems of trimethylaluminium.
Like so. Now there may be a slight flame as this comes out the end. There it is. Right. So why can't you weigh out trimethylaluminium in air? Well, let's have a look. Here's some in air. And as you can see, the compound's spontaneously catching fire as we dump it. And in fact, I've put about 2 grams of trimethylaluminium there. That's burning with about the same energy as a 1 bar electric fire at about the same rate. And so you've heard the glass crack there. That's the energy coming out of there.
Now let's listen to the next part of this video, which is about 9 minutes long, but I'll just play a short part of it.
Professor, you just showed me what 2 grams of it's like. How does industry deal with tons and tons of it?
Well, you've got to be pretty careful, and you saw that we had a metal canister here. It's sealed, it's under argon, so you need to pipe this liquid around, you need to build specialist apparatus, specialist plants, and they can cost many millions of euros or pounds or dollars, whatever you would like to put together. So there's a great lot of this material, but it's remarkably underutilized in many other chemical applications.
Now in this next video called Pyrophoric Materials Dangerous When Wet, we see what happens when aluminium alkyls such as triethylaluminium, slightly different to trimethylaluminium, is exposed to oxygen and water, pyrophoric materials. Now here we see the chemical being poured out into the air, and it bursts into flames as we saw before. Now I'm going to go to the end of the video and let's take a look at what happens when water is poured on the chemical. Yes, this is clearly what you want in your aircraft fuel, something that explodes on contact with oxygen and explodes on contact with water. Brilliant. Only a genius could have thought of that. But let's pretend for a moment that the highly volatile and explosive trimethylaluminum really was being used for chemtrailing. ZeroPointUFO fails to realise that if trimethylaluminum was added to the fuel of the aircraft, then the chemtrails, which he describes above as evolving as white smoke aluminium oxides, would always be present and visible at all altitudes, including during taxiing, during takeoff and landing. If the TMA was included in the fuel, it would also not be possible for the pilots to switch the chemtrails on and off, as ZeroPointUFO claims. Let's remember that the information ZeroPointUFO quoted did actually claim that the TMA was added to the aircraft fuel and not sprayed separately or directed into the jet engine from a separate supply. Quote, "We attempt to explain the physics of how jet fuel can be formulated to actually contain aluminum in the form of trimethylaluminum." And, quote, "The melting point of aluminum is 660 degrees C, while the combustion chamber in a 747 engine is over 1800 degrees C. This combination would cause any aluminum in the fuel supply to vaporize on combustion for a while longer as it exits the exhaust as thrust." So clearly, ZeroPointUFO is claiming that the trimethylaluminum is contained within the jet fuel. As we have seen, trimethylaluminum could not be utilized as it would result in a fiery end to the aircraft and all on board, and we haven't even considered the special requirements for safely storing, transporting and transferring bulk amounts of highly volatile and dangerous trimethylaluminum. ZeroPointUFO now goes off on a tangent from the current discussion and starts talking about HAARP and the alleged relationship from chemtrailing, but we'll cover that in part 3 of my response to ZeroPointUFO. As always, do check out my Facebook discussion page, Voices of Reason to Explain X, VORTEX. You'll find a link in the description area. And remember to subscribe if you'd like updates. Thank you for watching. Hello YouTube, this is Dazza the Cameraman. This is part 2 in my video response to ZeroPointUFO about chemtrailing. In this section we're going to look at the use of trimethylaluminum in chemtrailing. ZeroPointUFO continues. To respond to your question, I need only to provide one plausible explanation that explains how chemtrails can be formed directly behind a jet engine, and in doing so your first question is answered. ZeroPointUFO then posts the following information. The highlighted texts are copy and paste from various chemtrail articles on chemtrail web pages. ZeroPointUFO goes on to quote, "I would like to point your attention towards a substance called trimethylaluminum. Trimethylaluminum is the chemical compound with the formula Al2CH36 as abbreviated or abbreviation TMA, trimethylaluminum. This pyrophoric, colourless liquid is an industrially recognised organoaluminium compound. It evolves white smoke, aluminum oxides, when the vapour is released into the air. TMA is a combination of hydrocarbons that closely resembles gasoline." To quote an analysis conducted on geoengineer David Keith's report, quote, "We attempt to explain the physics of how jet fuel can be formulated to actually contain aluminum in the form of trimethylaluminum in order to spray aluminum oxide aerosols that originate directly from additives already in the jet fuel." End quote. It goes on to say, in 2010, geoengineer David Keith contracted Aurora Flight Sciences, AFS, to perform a cost analysis for geoengineering